All right. So I always like to start the class with a little bit of a recap of where we are in our progression of understanding. So we were talking about the Bainani, the middle guy, who isn't perfect on his inside, but yet he somehow maintains this perfect impulse control at all times. And the tool that the Tanya teaches is that the Bainani utilizes and maximizes the natural ability to have impulse control and just does that all the time. We also talked about how at that moment in that the Bainani has that impulse control, they can't imagine not having it. It's out of the question. It's like past their red line, which we all have our red lines that we won't cross, whether it's because somebody's watching, whether it's because it's just really is so opposing to our values and who we feel we are. It's so clear and obviously not us in a very black and white way. For us, that's a red line. For the Bainani, the black and white no is for everything. So now I want to ask you, does everything that we do require the same amount of effort? No, clearly no, right? And there's that very classic image of the iceberg, right? So there's the iceberg, what you see above the surface, and then there's below the surface so much. And that's for both sometimes things that we do look easy, look like they should be expected, and below the surface, there's so much effort and so much that goes into that somebody from the outside doesn't see. It could be for somebody in their life, it could be getting out of bed. For some could be the simplest thing, but yet for others that could be a huge win that required so much willpower and strength for whatever they're going through at the time. And for other things, it could be that it looks like a huge deal, but for that person, it actually could be natural. It could be somewhat easy for them. And it's not one of us is alike. So what's easy for one person is difficult for another person. And why are we talking about this? Because not all Bainanis are equal. In fact, on the first reading it says here that this is a reading from, it doesn't say here, but I think it's actually from one of the prophets. And it says, Vishaftem, I'm going to read in Hebrew first, Uri'item bein tzadik lirasha, bein oved Elokim la'asher lo avado. So we're supposed to we would return and see the difference between the righteous man and the wicked man, between he who serves God and between he who serves him not. So from the outset, it looks like we have a parallel here. Righteous serves God, wicked serves him not. Well, in fact, the Tanya is going to go on and explain that actually the serves him and serves him not is not talking about the tzaddik at all. That's talking about the Bainani. So we have the tzaddik. The tzaddik is actually not somebody who's called oved, in a present tense, serves him or serves him not. He's called eved. What's an eved, Liat? A slave, but the more positive word for it would be servant. Yeah, a servant. No, but it's the same word in Hebrew for two different things, which can be used in two different ways. But in this case, we'll translate it as servant. The righteous man is a servant of God, passive tense. He's made it to the servant status. Just like a king is a king and a prince is a prince, he is a servant. It's not an active thing, it's not an action word. He's made it there. Whereas the Bainani is either serving, or serving him not. So the serving him not isn't talking about a rasha or a tzaddik. He's talking about the Bainani. So what is the difference between one who serves him, somebody who's serving God, we're actually not at the next page yet, or somebody a Bainani who is serving him not? What is that? Because they're both Bainanis, but one Bainani is serving God. And the other Beinoni, despite the fact that he has perfect impulse control, he's doing everything perfectly, he's doing all the commandments, this 365 do not commandments, he never does them. And the 248 do commandments, he does them all as soon as he has the opportunity, right away. He's doing, why would he be called somebody who serves him not?
Actively practicing it?
Exactly. So here's where the Tanya kind of realigns and our values. This is not about achieving a state or or even a perfection. This is about a service. This is about a practice. It's about, the key word here is effort. So back to the iceberg example. Somebody can be doing something that looks so simple and basic, but yet it can be so challenging for them. It can be a huge win when they accomplish that simple thing. That is somebody who is serving. Yet somebody who is, maybe they got a PhD in something. It's a huge accomplishment. Yet for that person, it was easy. It was natural. They didn't even think about it. They were just, they have the brains, they have the, what they call Sitzfleisch, they have the, ability to, attention span to sit still and do it. They have just the propensity, the natural disposition for that. They had the opportunity for that. It was just the natural course of where life took them. They never made a conscious choice. It's just what they, so, on paper, whoa, they received a PhD. Oh my God, they achieved that. But maybe that person is not serving. He's possibly, this is not something that we can say about somebody else, right? This is only something that we can analyze about ourselves because only we know what's going on inside of us. But there are the things that we know might look like a big deal, but for us it was easy. So somebody can, it's actually quite mind-boggling that somebody can be a Beinoni, a perfect Beinoni, yet he's called somebody who serves him not. And the example that the Tanya brings is about,
what does it mean, Rachel? We have to find and place ourselves in positions where we have a struggle, where we have to make an effort?
Exactly, and that's what we're going to get to with the next reading. Okay, so, and that's why we're talking about that line, that red line. That's why we open with that, because the Beinoni, it's more of a red line of effort versus product versus the result. For the Beinoni, both the one who serves God and the one who serves him not, their end result is perfect. But for the serving, the Beinoni who is actively serving God, they're constantly pushing the line of their effort, of their active service. So let's study the example that the Tanya brings. So on the other side of the page, there is right at the top. This explains the Talmudic statement that he who serves God refers to one who reviews his studies 101 times, while he who serves him not refers to one who reviews his studies only 100 times. So we need some background here, because 100 and 101 isn't a big difference, and the starting point is quite high. So historically, we given the Torah, this is perfect in time for Shavuot, great subject. When the Torah was given at Sinai, the tradition is that God gave the entire Torah with all of its details, but only part of it is part of the written Torah, which Moses subsequently stayed on the mountain and studied the whole Torah, and then throughout the rest of the 40 years in the desert, this Torah was, God dictated the Torah to Moses and he wrote it down, and before he died, there was 13 Torahs, one for each tribe and one for the Ark. That's the written Torah. That's the same Torah that we have in the Ark right there, and that's our tradition that gets passed down. Each Torah gets written by a professional scribe with an existing kosher Torah right in front of them, so the transmission remains completely accurate. Along with that was given the oral Torah, which is the oral tradition, which is all the details of the Torah. How, for example, in the Shema it says, you shall bind it and put it between your eyes. What does that mean? Do we do a tattoo? Tattoos are actually a lo ta'aseh. There are no do not commandments, so it can't be that. But what does that actually mean? So the oral tradition, which was given at the same time as the Torah, just not written down, explains that it's the tefillin, it's the 4 parchments, it's this exact portion of the Torah that's written on those parchments. They're placed in the following order. They're put in the black boxes, which are created from the animal skins, and they look like this, and they're put exactly there. All those details is oral Torah. In addition, the oral Torah also has explanations, a lot of whys, a lot of philosophy. And the other part of the oral Torah is the mysticism, which we're studying now. And the mysticism was more left, like we talked about in the very first chapter of the Tanya, that historically many did not know. Most Jewish people didn't have access to study of Jewish mysticism. It's only in the last 300 years, with the Alter Rebbe who wrote the Tanya being one of the first, to explain the mysticism to people like us. That we can all have access to the richness and the spiritual, mystical aspect of the Torah, which existed the entire time. So this is not new knowledge, it's old knowledge. It's knowledge that was given together with the Torah, yet not written down and passed down orally. So why are we talking about this? Because the 101 times. Before the Torah was the oral Torah and started to become written down in the era of the Romans, like 2,000 years ago, right? Around the destruction of the temple, actually. And that's why we have the Talmud. The Talmud is the encyclopedia of the oral Torah. Still very cryptic, still very general. And as we go through history, more parts of the oral Torah became written down. And the reason why Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi decided to write down the oral Torah was because he realized that through persecution it was important. Nevertheless, what was going on before that? How did we have all these scholars that had lots and lots to write down? How did they know the knowledge? Because of the oral transmission. And in order for the oral transmission to be accurate and effective, they were scholars. The tradition was they would memorize and study whatever passage it was 100 times. That was the standard. Any student studying Torah 100 times. That's what it was. Though that 100 was so standard that it was, I'm not going to say easy, but it was in the comfort zone. So what would happen if a student went out of did 101 times, studied it one extra time? It's only one extra. But because that extra one was breaking their comfort zone, that was service. That's service. That's breaking, just the idea of breaking your comfort zone requires effort. It requires energy to break inertia. So it's like, when I used to do laps in the pool. I was in that stage. I go in and out of phases, and I used to count like my laps, and I literally thought of this when I was in the pool, and I'm like, I usually do 20 like this, 30 like that. Today I'm going to do 32. And I'm telling you something, those extra 2 were so difficult. I promise you, it really did feel that way, because like I'm used to doing a certain amount, and that extra 2 felt like I should be done.
Would you equate it to trying to give not just your best, but almost more than your
That's exactly
best?
it. Well,
Because
it's breaking
how
your.
can you get better
Right.
than that?
Right. I think that's very profound what you're saying. I think that the definition of your best is, if you're defining your best as what I do and this is what I do, that isn't actually your best. So once it becomes, if it's really your best, it's breaking your comfort zone by virtue of it being your best. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you said, in that moment, when do your best in that particular moment. So
That's
vary from
You
moment to
said
moment.
that last.
And that's about the line
Yeah.
that we push and push and push. I don't know if the visualization is closer to you or further to you, either way works. But the idea is that at that moment, like you said, it's your best. And if you keep doing that one thing that is your best, then eventually that becomes part of your comfort zone, and then you stretch to the next best. That's service. That's the Beinoni who's serving God actively, is they are constantly pushing the line to include something out of their comfort zone. And it could be something small. In fact, when it's something small, then it's almost more indicative that it's about the service and not about the accomplishment. It's like when you're doing a new exercise, and sometimes just taking let's say I'm into yoga, so taking the yoga pose just a little bit more accurate sometimes takes more effort than pushing yourself to do the entire thing, and then like you might have looked like the pose, but the service is in the nuance, right? So that's like, it might even be that 101. That's why the Tanya doesn't say this is one who does it 200. It's not 100 versus 200. It's 100 versus 101, because that extra nuance, putting that intention into that is service, and that requires mindfulness and effort. There's another example of, there's 100 times and 101. The other example is like if you ever have, if you ever had kids in school, or you can imagine maybe as a teacher you might be privy to this idea of like, okay, so you pay tuition for like from whatever the school day is, 9 to 3:30 or 8:30 to 3, whatever it is. And if you pick up your child at 3:45, not 3:30, then you're billed like exponentially higher, right? And then it's like sometimes some schools have like a policy of every 5 minutes late is another like $20, like something crazy. And if you calculate, does that mean that every 5 minutes of the school day costs that much? No, because the tuition covers the normal, right? What's expected, and more than expected, it costs more. It takes more effort. It's out of the norm. So the example given on this page, is it on this page? Yeah. The Talmud illustrates this by the analogy of the market of the donkey drivers. The drivers would charge one zuz, I'm in the middle of the page, one zuz for 10 parsi, Persian miles, but demanded 2 zuz for driving 11 parsi. For driving an 11th mile exceeded their customary practice. And you have this with meters on taxis and things like that. The idea is, it still applies today. Like there's a certain set amount, and if you go out of that, you're billed by a different ratio. Why? Because it's out of the set amount. And that implies that right as soon as we go outside of our comfort zone, it's worth more. That's service. I just want to make sure. Okay. So for a Beinoni, some might struggle in different ways. Some struggle in one area of life, some struggle in another area of life, right? That's, how we experience life. And that's why it becomes a very personal thing. So in order to be somebody who is serving actively, who is going out of their comfort zone and being mindful, is it enough to exercise 100% impulse control? Does the impulse, like, the idea, imagine for a minute, if you close your eyes and do like a tiny meditation, to imagine your entire life in complete 100% impulse control. What emotion is coming up? Take a moment. There's no right or wrong answer. Is the motion Is the emotion like an upward feeling? Is it a downward feeling? Is it an inner feeling? Outward? Where is the energy? How is the energy moving? When you're ready,
I
can
guess
open your
I
eyes.
equate it with like peacefulness because I wouldn't get into all the mishigas that I get into when I don't have my impulse control. But
Yeah.
I don't know if that's exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, well, no, there's no right or wrong answer. So you've experienced peacefulness.
I think it's like a trapped energy personally. I think that, you can strive for that, but without stepping out of rigidity, you're sort of trapped in this pattern of perfection, right? So in order to better yourself and get to the 101 perhaps, you need to step outside of that or slip outside of that, or however you define that. Because I think it's in those moments where character is built, perhaps.
That's quite profound. Anybody experience a similar trapped feeling?
Me too.
I
Yeah.
started with that, but then I was
Yeah.
like, I'm just gonna let that go.
Yeah,
more-
that's beautiful.
I felt more that actually I was happy to have those not impulse control moments in my life, because I feel that sometimes when you grow,
Mhm.
you realize in the aftermath that it wasn't maybe the best thing, but you grew.
Mm-hmm.
You understood
Those were
something.
growth moments you're both describing.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
When I imagined it, I felt kind of a sinking feeling, like
I
a
did too.
depression almost.
Yeah.
I did too.
Yeah.
Very flat.
Which is it can
Which
the
is-
positive
can
side
be-
of that can be peaceful.
Right.
And we also talked about the Bainani who's not serving. They're probably quite peaceful.
Right.
Right? They're existing in their little comfort zone. They might be naturally very studious. They might be naturally not very curious, not very passionate about anything.
That's what bothered me.
Temptation,
The passion
Yeah.
would
That
be
flat
gone.
line.
Level
Right.
out.
And it made me sad.
And that's why the Tanya wasn't over after chapter 14.
You said you had something exciting this week to share.
Well, I was just excited that it was a little bit more,
Upbeat.
yes. But that's the impulse control is valid and true and accurate. However, it doesn't end there. That's a good starting point. If we finished with impulse control, we might all look like, and we succeeded somehow. I think we would be. What would we be? Would we be more like the lo avadu, the non-serving, the Bainani who is serving him not, or the Bainani who is serving? What does it more look like? Somebody who is just always impulse control. Now maybe they're still really, really working on that impulse control. But then they work at it so much, it kind of stagnates. Maybe it becomes peaceful. But you asked the question last week, why do we have to struggle? Right? And basically I'm looking for that word, the point of the thesis, the
Objective?
yeah, the objective of this chapter, the
Essence.
essence, the learning point of the chapter.
action of learning.
Yeah.
And the struggle.
The
to
abstract.
learn.
Like when you
Yes.
have a paper, like whatchamacallit, like
A thesis?
yes, like academic paper,
Yes.
you have an abstract, which kind of sums it up, right? So the abstract of this chapter is the point is the struggle. The
action.
struggle is the service,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So why do we struggle? It's like the question of the universe. If God didn't want struggle, I don't think he would create humans. He would create angels.
That's what you said last
Right.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to the 100% impulse control, it creates perfection, perfect actions, but I think there's more to it. There's more service. What was missing when we all had that thought? We had the peace, We had a little bit of a sinking feeling. We had this like realization that the imperfection and the struggle was something we wanted. What were we missing? What we were missing, I'll answer it, emotion. Because until now we were talking about how the tzaddik flows inside and outside, it's one. They have the perfect emotion and it just brings forth the perfect action, and they only experience positive, and they're having this love like a flaming fire. That sounds like what we want. Like, that's a beautiful, enjoyable experience. And then there's the Beinoni, who on one hand it's peaceful because we could accept ourselves with the struggle as we are and not beat down on ourselves for struggling. But there is like this built-in dissonance between actions and feelings, because the feelings are so imperfect that we need to sort of somehow control them from producing the actions we want. But what if we sparked the emotions of the godly soul? Now, the tzaddik does this perfectly, where they only experience emotions of a godly soul because they only have a godly soul, or if they have an animal soul, it's dormant like a dead virus, like I mentioned last week. But let's say, so we have the animal soul, it has its emotions, but can we nurture the emotions of our godly soul without the expectation that it's going to take over our animal soul? And maybe with that nurturing of emotion on the godly soul part of our heart, we can experience the passion that was missing. And I dare say there's some connection between the service, well, that's what the Tanya says, but I'm trying to understand it and internalize it, the service of the Beinoni versus the non-serving Beinoni. What might be the difference between them? The non-serving Beinoni was probably relying on their natural abilities, their natural love. I mentioned last week, we're all born with a birthright, natural love of God, just like a child is born with a natural love of their parents. They don't need to cultivate it. They don't need to meditate on the fact that they love their mom and dad so much. They just do. We also have that with God. It's called ahava mesuteret, hidden love. But the hidden love is hidden. So for the Beinoni who isn't serving God, they're relying on their nature. Their nature somehow is more in line with their natural love. They don't have much opposition. Some people are born with more opposition than others, right? Or some people, like we said, have gotten to the point where they have worked on themselves to where they have achieved that their impulse control, what used to be difficult, is now not difficult anymore, and they coast, right? So they're relying on a very natural experience. In order to be the Beinoni that's actively serving God and breaking the comfort zone, that would require us to stoke our natural love, meditate on it, and make it bigger. So we're feeling something which will then motivate us to have that impulse control, but not from a coasting place or a place of rote, or like, this is what I was taught to do, so I'll just do it. It's like, no, I want to be connected to God. I love God, and therefore. So that's service because it's active. So effort is required for service, but also action, activeness. And when you're feeling an emotion, that is automatically something active. Feeling, right, is an action word. We are feeling. I also would love to explain it like, if you have a relationship with somebody, let's say it's a husband and wife, and your husband wants a gift. He wants a certain watch or something. And you were like, okay, I'm just going to go buy him the watch because he wants it. So, you do the thing and you check it off and you give him the watch and it's great. Fine. So you've done it. You've done the action. But what's missing there? Isn't it so much better if you want to give that gift and you put, you're excited about selecting the watch and you go to the store and you have joy and energy and you give it to them why do you have this joy and energy? It's because you want to please your husband, because you love him, right? So that's like doing the things for God is like, okay, you're doing it, you're checking off the box, but what God really wants or craves for or sets up for us to be able to achieve is a relationship with him. So therefore, what we can do is we can meditate on our love for God, and then everything we're doing is an action way, a service way. And there's two types of love we can do this with, which is the way that Tanya is going to introduce the next set of chapters. So the first set of chapters, the next few sets of chapters, is going to be explaining how we can arouse our natural born love. And we just stoke it up, meditate on it, focus in on what we already have. And there's another way, which is a little bit more difficult, and that is to generate emotion. With different type of meditation. Remember we talked about in chapter 3 how mind, the intellect, produces and gives birth to emotion. So it would be with utilizing that way, that avenue of meditating on an idea, which will then give birth to new emotions that are generated by your thought. So it's a very intellectual pursuit. It's studying and studying and studying and internalizing the study so much that you now feel your study. You now feel connected to it. It's personal to you, and you start to feel something about it. Their nuance, their difference is nuanced, but as we go through the chapters that are coming up, we will then start to analyze and understand each type of love, and we'll see that they're actually two different paths, both correct. So that concludes this entire chapter 15. And next week, we'll start loving God.
Thank you. Wow. Exciting.
Yes, so let's close our eyes and meditate on that new feeling that we might be starting to feel. So let's ground our feet. You could open up your hands in an open posture if that feels good to you. Let's begin by taking some deep breaths in and out. What feeling is coming up for us? Before, when we talked about, we imagined serving God perfectly, with perfect impulse control. We always did the right thing at every single opportunity. We felt somewhat limited, somewhat stifled. The energy felt sinking, maybe stagnant. But then we started to imagine bringing some joy, some emotion into our service. Let's imagine loving God. We don't know what that means. We don't necessarily need to know exactly, have an understanding of the nuances of our love. Yet, We know we love God because it's inside of us since the moment we were born. What does that feel like? Acknowledging, looking at the truth of our soul. Give yourself permission to let that natural love that you found inside of yourself to feel, to be felt. Tune in to the direction of energy in your body. How is it flowing now? What does it feel like to you? Allow that emotion to be, to grow if it wants to grow, to rise if it wants to rise, to be felt in your face, in your facial expression. Enjoy the feeling. Allow yourself to experience this feeling throughout your day, in whatever way it is felt. Allow it to be there in your heart, like your little truth inside of you. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes. And you don't have to let that feeling go away. You can feel it there. As you integrate your feeling with your life. I'd love to hear how that felt for you. If anybody feels like they want to share.
Very floaty and peaceful. Very strong pull upwards.
Upwards.
Huge
I felt upwards and outwards, whereas before I felt in and down. I then now felt up and out. Did anybody else feel that way?
Like a little like piece of like gold or something shiny, emanating, radiating outward.
Wow, it's beautiful. You had a color to it. That's beautiful.
It was more the visual was more like a tornado, something spinning up. That was the metaphor I got.
Beautiful. And I'm not sure, Diana, but I think that love is given the color gold in some of like the prophecies and stuff. I'm going to check it out.
Okay.
Yeah, the word that's coming up is paz. Does that sound right to you? Like
Paz.
like paz means gold, but like the love being that color. It's interesting that you felt that. It's beautiful. Thank you for
It was
coming.
very hard to, when you said open your eyes, it felt very hard to open them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I felt that too.
I think everybody wanted to
Be there
stay.
longer.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly, stay there.
Stay with the feeling.
Yeah.
Mine-
Well, maybe you needed to stay with the feeling longer. Maybe it was
Mine was the colors of sunset, like a fading, all the pinks and the oranges, just so
warm colors.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was nice.
And I think it's especially important now to feel into our truth because we are getting so inundated with falsehood. Again, I feel like right now there's another resurgence of that going on. And I recently had the experience where I felt compelled to want to fight the darkness. And I really tried to remember, first I wanted to fight, right? And then I just was like, okay, this doesn't feel like me. So after I waited a little bit, I realized that I would rather be true to my truth with regards to what's going on in the world and feel safe in that. And then nobody can take that safety away from me, They can say what they want to say, but that doesn't mean that that's true, and it doesn't have to penetrate my beautiful heart that loves God and is, the truth of what we know in the world's current events to be true.
But it is a struggle.
Well, it brings us down to the struggle.